Awesome. Well, my name is Zack Neihof. I'm the TSMO and ITS program lead for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. And today I'm here to talk to you all about our truck information parking management systems, or TPIMS pilot that we've been working on here in Kentucky over the last year or so. But before I jump into the presentation, I just want to give some backstory about why we're working through this pilot now. Kentucky and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, like many other DOTs, and as Dan alluded to, over the last 4 to 5 years, the need for truck parking facilities has increased exponentially. And so we've got 13 sites, 12 of those public sites across Kentucky, and we're utilizing entry and exit sensors for that truck availability spots for the real-time information on how many stalls or parking stalls we have available at each one of those 13 sites. And the issue with entry and exit sensors with our facilities is that an example we're going to touch on later today in Bullitt County, we've got 28 marked legal stalls there in that facility. But true capacity for that facility within the constraints or within the confines of exit sensors is upwards of 60 trucks that can physically park there at any one given time. And so by utilizing those entry and exit sensors, we had a false number of spots that are available, because by nature, when that trucker is driving and they're coming on their 11th hour and they need to park, they're obviously going to take that marked stall first if available. And so a pattern that we routinely witness and notice throughout our sites across the Commonwealth is our first 30 or so spots would fill up first. And then we'd have those trucks filter in and park where they can to take their required 10-hour rest. And what that resulted in is on the tail end of that parking peak, those trucks that parked first in that facility would obviously leave first because their 10 hours would be up. And so we'd have that outflow of trucks leaving those marked stalls available. But in using our entry and exit sensors, our reporting that we would put on the public-facing signs and public-facing sites would still say we're at capacity, so we're full, because in actuality, we might still have 40 vehicles parked in that facility, although more than half of our marked stalls are available. And so that leads us into the purpose of our pilot, which was our innovative technology team here in Kentucky decided that truck parking was a critical need for us here in Kentucky, and specifically identifying technology, innovative technology that truly can accurately represent the number of spots that we have available across our 13 sites without a need for extensive ground truthing or human verification. And so we actually applied for 2 different projects, 2 different high priority innovative technology deployment grants. And we're specifically going to be talking about our fiscal year 22, our research and pilot project today. And so our goals for that pilot project, first off, we had to evaluate our current system. Like I said, we've got 13 marked parking areas, around 700 spots total across the Commonwealth. All 13 of those systems utilize entry and exit radar systems. They require a pretty robust daily manual review or ground truthing from our TMC operators. And on average, we over-report by about 25%. So once we really understood the foundational place of where we are as a cabinet, we then wanted to survey our other states and our other partners to realize what they're doing well within the truck parking space, and then potentially what we could learn from their lessons, specifically in innovative technology. And so we got a kind of a benchmarking foundational understanding of the community of practice, the number of spots typically at each facility, what type of technology, and then how accurate is their system. After that, we really wanted to understand the state of the practice for the vendors, for the manufacturers within the truck parking space, specifically for those detection sensors, those detection units, to understand, what is available, what is on the market, what's coming downstream here in the next few years. In addition, we were also investing heavily in vehicle detection for our signalized intersections and going through a series of pilots to evaluate different technologies in that space So we knew that the space was innovative. We knew that there were better solutions on the shelf or coming down the pike ready to be utilized. And then after that benchmarking, after that notice to industry to kind of gain understanding of what they have ready to provide for us, we identified 3 different vendors that we wanted to evaluate in that pilot project. And so now I'm going to cover those 3 different vendors, and we actually have 3 vendors, 4 different technologies that we're evaluating. We actually decided to evaluate them all at the same location, all at the same site. That's in Bullitt County. It's actually our Welcome Center for Kentucky on I-65 southbound, just south of Indiana. And so vendor number 1, we're evaluating a radar and video fusion sensor. And I should say, as you're looking on the screen, pay special attention to that column with coverage. Ideally, we wanted a true apples to apples comparison where we are evaluating all 28 spots with all 4 different technologies. However, we were limited by our budget. And so to be able to evaluate the 4 different technologies through the vendors that we identified in our scanning and benchmarking tour, we knew we had to reduce the number of spots or coverage for some of those more hardware heavy technologies. And so that radar and video fusion sensor that you see row number 1, that was one of the more expensive technologies. Our pilot cost for this 1-year pilot is between $40,000 and $50,000, and that gets us about 8 spots worth of coverage there. The second vendor we're working with is a series of fixed view cameras with analytics. Some of these cameras we already had on site that we were using for ground truthing. And then working with these vendors, we identified a few other field of visions that we needed to install additional cameras to capture. So that fixed view vendor 2 is around a $30,000 to $40,000 range, and we're covering all 28 spots of that facility. And then the third vendor, they're utilizing existing PTZ camera that we had for ground truthing, running those video images through AI at a cost of around $10,000 to $20,000 for the year-long pilot, covering 28 spots. And then lastly, that vendor 3 also provided us a LiDAR solution at around $15,000 to $25,000 for the year evaluation, covering 6 spots. And now I'm going to walk us through kind of the installation, where we're at in the evaluation, and then we'll go through and discuss each one of those vendors in a little more detail. So we started this in late 2024 with the installation of the equipment, worked through some challenges with system configuration, with integration, and then we actually brought all these systems online, and the evaluation started May 1st of 2025. Now, I will say that because this was a pilot, we did not want to install any permanent additional infrastructure at these facilities. So we worked with those vendors to be able to attach their sensors on luminaire poles or lighting poles there at the facility, developed step-down transformers that we're able to have in enclosures mounted there on those lights. And then those lights are also a photocell activated, so they're on at night, off during the day. And so we were able to develop battery backup systems that would charge at night while those lights were powered, and then power those via battery during the day so that we would have continuous power to all of these devices. So each one of the vendors had a little different flavor, a little different option of how they were providing that power through that step-down transformer and battery backup system, but all of them are operating, if installed on luminaire poles, are operating off of that battery backup. So those devices that I'm talking about specifically might be a PTZ camera, they might be the LiDAR sensor, or that fusion sensor that we talked about with vendor number 1. Because this was a little bit of an unusual pilot, even for the vendors, to have that semi-permanent, sort of temporary year-long pilot, we had some challenges with missing install materials compared to our purchase orders, some broken equipment. Unfortunately, one of those LiDAR units we're actually still waiting on to be replaced. And then because we were retrofitting for the battery backup systems within NEMA enclosures, one of those systems experienced an early water leak, which we were able to correct. And then let's talk about the actual technology. So this was number one. That's that radar and video fusion sensor, and we're covering 8 spots there at this parking facility. So what you're seeing in the top left picture, that is those are the sensors that are installed at the top of that luminaire pole. At the bottom of that picture, you'll see the NEMA enclosure. We have the actual sensor to the photo to the right, and then down below is just an image that we're capturing from the video portion of that fusion sensor. And then on the far right, you'll see that dashboard that the vendor has provided. So we're utilizing the vendor dashboard for all 3 of these technologies, but additionally, we're capturing kind of an unbiased, ground truthed version of the accuracy for each one of these devices, which we'll cover a little later on in this presentation. So vendor number 2, this is the fixed view cameras plus analytics. So this vendor was able to utilize an existing fixed view camera. And then also, so that's the top image of your screen with those trucks parked there. And then the bottom left, after talking with the 2 video analytics vendors, we decided we need additional coverage. So we were able to install a camera on a shepherd hook on actually the bathroom facility here at the rest area. But I'd like to point out that this image you see, it's in the morning, and you see that we actually have overflow of trucks parking outside of those marked stalls. And so with our existing entry exit sensors, this would report as full because we actually have the same number of available spots as we have trucks parked on those curbsides. But in actuality, we've got 6, 7 spots that are available. And so this is just a real-time example of what we're facing every day in that really heavy human verification, ground truthing responsibility to push out accurate information to our advanced signs that publish our truck parking. And then this is an example of the vendor dashboard that's showing the space utilization. It gives us some really good metrics on occupancy, some repeating patterns that we may notice, and then also the duration of the parking for those vehicles that are utilizing our facility. And then we're moving into our third vendor. It's also camera with analytics. I would say the biggest difference between vendor 2 and vendor 3, since they're both video with AI, is that vendor 3 is actually pulling these off of PTZ cameras with preset zones that those cameras outside of their PTZ activities will reset to that predefined zone. As folks know that are using PTZ cameras for analytics, that can sometimes be challenging to ensure that the camera resets to the home position every time in the same manner in an accurate way. So we've had pretty good success with this pilot, with this vendor and that PTZ capability. And so that vendor actually does have control of that PTZ camera because they installed that camera as part of this pilot. And so what you see on the top of your screen is an example of their dashboard. On the far right, you'll see that PTZ camera with that NEMA enclosure at the bottom or middle of that luminaire pole. And then you'll see some of those images that we're pulling across the left lower side of your screen. And again, just another example where we've got a truck that's parked outside of that marked parking zone, parking area. And then after we started with vendor 3 in this evaluation, they said, hey, we want to evaluate our LiDAR system. And we feel like it's going to be more accurate. We feel like it's a good investment for the cabinet to evaluate in this pilot. So they actually provided us 2 different LiDAR units. Unfortunately, one of those LiDAR units, we're still working through some challenges in the equipment, but LiDAR number 1 has been functioning and has been reporting since our May 1st official start of this pilot. And it's only reporting 6 stalls, as you can see on that top image from that vendor dashboard. And with any good pilot, we obviously are utilizing that vendor software that I've shown examples of each time, but we also need an unbiased review for the cabinet, because we don't want to rely solely on what the vendor is providing to us as far as their self-performance. And so we're working with KTC, or the Kentucky Transportation Center, which is the research arm of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet that's housed at the University of Kentucky here in Lexington, Kentucky. And so we have research staff that is continuously ground truthing and monitoring these three systems for latency, for accuracy, for reliability. One thing for us was weather. How do these different systems perform under weather conditions specific for our region and our area? In Kentucky, we could have snow one day and 60 degrees the next. We could have freezing rain and sleet. And so ensuring that within a 36-hour period, these sensors could be experiencing three different seasons almost. It was critical for us to ensure that whatever we decide both worked within our legacy systems on the back end, but also works with our weather challenges in that day-to-day real-world environment. And then findings to date. Now, I should say that this started May 1st, so we're only a few months into this evaluation. But right now, we've got accuracy reporting for all four of these different technologies provided by these three different vendors. And so thing to note, if it's over 100%, that means the system's over-reporting their availability. And then if it's under 100%, then it's under-reporting. So that vendor number one, that heavy hardware radar video fusion sensor, we're over-reporting about 115%. That fixed view camera, again, we're over-reporting even substantially higher than vendor number one. And then vendor number three with that PTZ camera, we're at about 78%. So we're reporting or under-reporting as a system. But the thing I want to point out is the LiDAR unit. Of course, it's only 6 stalls, but we're almost 100% accurate there, just plus or minus by 2%. So we're really pleased to see the performance of that LiDAR unit. And we're also incorporating LiDAR into some other detection strategies we have across the Commonwealth, specifically to prevent wrong way driving. So it's really exciting to see LiDAR having more and more of a presence as we move towards that safe mobility outcomes for our road network, whether it be providing safe truck parking and accurate truck parking availability, or through preventing wrong way driving across our Commonwealth as well. And then kind of a next steps. First off, at the very high level, we want to get that second LiDAR online working appropriately. So we're actively working with that vendor, trying to bring that LiDAR system online. We hold monthly internal calls with the vendors and the ITD team, the innovative technology team here in Kentucky, and we're continuing to pull in data. And this pilot project is slated to end in April of 2026, with the final report coming later on this fall. But the real reason for this pilot, in addition to those 13 sites that we're actively publishing and broadcasting truck availability parking to, we're also looking to expand the footprint and the capacity of both our existing truck parking facilities, as well as constructing brand new parking facilities across the Commonwealth. And so this technology, the outcome of this pilot, will result in these technologies being slated and selected for those future projects as well. So in addition to retrofitting our existing 13 sites, all of our new sites that we bring online where we advertise truck parking will also utilize this technology. And with that, it ends my presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Hey, thanks, Zach. A couple questions. One question is, do all of these technologies integrate into one dashboard, or do you or a coworker have to go to various websites to see the data from each vendor?
Yeah, so we have not integrated we're pulling information through an API feed, but we have not fully integrated any of these technologies. The reason being is for the purpose of this pilot with KTC, they're able to log into each one of those vendor technologies directly. If we were to scale this out as a true cabinet operation, where our TMC managers or TMC operators are responsible for accessing that data, ensuring the accuracy, then we would fully integrate that into our ATMS there at the TMC. But however, for the public facing stall availability that we're broadcasting or publishing, we're still utilizing our same practices that we were before the pilot started, which is that entry exit sensor and then that human ground truthing, human verification multiple times a day. So we've not changed our practice for what we're publishing yet until we have the results of this pilot.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question, can you clarify what over and under reporting means relative to the accuracy of reporting space utilization?
Yeah, definitely. So if it's saying that we're over reporting, essentially what that means is that if we're saying that we've got 8 stalls that are available, it means the system's over reporting that availability and we actually don't have 8 stalls. So we have fewer stalls actually available than what we're reporting. So those 120 to 166% ranges on first vendor 1 and 2, in actuality, we had fewer stalls available than what they said were available.